Hey guys, it's Coach Brian going over the 1.2 practice. Just going to work a few of these to help you get started and help you through any trouble points. I'm going to leave some for you to do on your own, and if you need any help, you can come see me or any of your other geometry teachers during tutorial times for extra help. So I'm going to start with this first one because this has actually been giving people a lot of trouble, and it is kind of a tricky question. It talks about a picnic area that is at the midpoint between Lubbock and Amarillo, and it wants you to find the distance to the picnic area. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that you are starting, if there was a number line, you're starting at 0, and that's where this sign is, okay? This sign right here. This sign is telling you that from you, Lubbock is 5 miles, and that if you go all the way out to Amarillo, you have then traveled 128 miles. That's from where you're standing right now, okay? So the picnic is halfway between them. It's not halfway between you and Amarillo, it's halfway between Lubbock and Amarillo. And so what you need to do is you need to find out if this is half and this is half, where is this point located? And so from 128 to 5, okay, the difference between those is 123 miles. That means this whole distance from Lubbock to Amarillo is 123 miles. And if I divide that by 2 to get to the midpoint, that leaves 61.5. So this mark is 61.5 miles from Lubbock. It's also that far from Amarillo, but it's not that far from where you're standing right now because you are already 5 miles from Lubbock. So this one's a little tricky because after you find the midpoint, you have to add that 5 miles between you and Lubbock into your answer, and you should get 66.5 miles. 66.5 miles. Distance on a number line, all right, you're just looking for what the absolute value of the length between 2 points is. So if I'm looking from E to F, okay, I can go from E to 0 or 0 to E, and that is going to be -2. And then I can go from 0 to F, and that's 1, okay? And I'm using the absolute value because I'm talking about how far they are from 0, right? And so absolute value of -2 is 2. Absolute value of 1 is 1. That means the distance between these points is 3. And yeah, while you have a number line, you could just count 1, 2, 3. But you're not always going to have a number line, and sometimes the numbers are much bigger and much more far apart than just what would be realistic to draw a number line. I'll let you do part B on your own. 3. Also a number line, similar to the first that we worked. But I know one part, I know M to N, and I know that the whole length is represented by an expression. And I know that NR is also unknown. So I've got, a little bit of information here, but it doesn't just give me everything that I need to go ahead and solve this from the beginning. And so if you remember from our notes, a part of a segment plus a part of a segment will give me a whole thing. And so in this case, if I'm asking you what is the whole thing and what are the parts are MN and NR, and the whole thing is MR. And what it's asking me to find specifically is MN. All right, MN. I'm looking for this region right here, this segment. What is its length? Well, I could just say 2.5x, but I actually have enough information to figure out what x is and get a more clear and exact answer. So what I want to do is I want to take the 2.5x from MN, and I want to add the x from NR, and I want to set those equal to 5x minus 3, which is the expression for the whole line. All right, the expression for the whole line right there. And in that, expression, I can now combine like terms. Oops, I stayed on the eraser, sorry. I can combine like terms, so 1x plus 2 point, that gives me 3.5x. And then I can move some numbers around, isolate my x, and figure out what that value of x is. So I'm going to subtract 3.5x from both sides. That leaves me with 1.5x. I'm going to add 3 over. And so now I've got this 3 equals 1.5x. And my final step would be divide both sides by 1.5. And when I do that, I get x fully isolated, and I get that x equals 2. Now, a common mistake is just stopping right there and being like, okay, I found x, I'm done. But that is not the case. You are looking for mn, which means you're now going to take this expression, 2.5, and instead of putting x, you're going to put in 2 that we just solved for. And 2.5 times 2 equals 5. So the distance of mn is 5. Number 4 says E is the midpoint of segment DF. So I like to start sketching things as I read them. So I've got a segment, and it is DF, and E is perfectly in the middle of it. How do I know that? Because the question said it's the midpoint. And so there's some information that's like understood. This is half and this is half. How do I know that? Because the midpoint splits things into 2 equal halves. And so what I'm actually looking for is DE, EF, and DF. I'm looking for this segment, and the whole thing, okay? Those are the things that I'm looking for. And the question does give me a little bit more information. It says that D to E is 2x plus 4. E to F is 3x minus 1. And so just to get you started here, I am going to help you solve for x. And that is where I will stop and let you do the rest. Now, how can I solve for x? Well, I know that these two segments, D to E and E to F, are equal. DE equals E to F because of the midpoints, okay? So that means I can actually take the expressions that represent them and set them equal to each other. And now I would just solve for x. X equals 5. I'm going to leave it right there because once you know that x equals 5, you can use that and these equations to solve for these. You can answer number 5 after you have A, B, and C done on question 4 and see if you notice anything about the relationship between them. And similar thing with 6. It says that M is the midpoint of AB. So the first thing I would start doing is I would draw what it's saying, segment AB. All right, segment AB. How do I know that? Because the symbol that's above the AB, and then M is the midpoint right in the middle. And then it gives me information that each of these is half and half, and it also tells me that each one of these is an expression. A to M is 4x plus 10, and B to M is 5x minus 7. So I know that these equal each other, and I know that together they make a longer segment, AB. But specifically, this is just wanting me to find x. All right, it's wanting me to find x. So set them equal to each other, solve for x. The rest of these use a lot of the words like between, bisects, between. So they're all very similar, and I don't want you to, I'll solve a couple of them for you, but I don't want you to just skip over these. I want you to try to take the time to do each one and really get a good grasp for everything. The first one says that Q is between P and R. So I'm going to go ahead, just like always, and start drawing what I read. Q is between, that means they're collinear. Between means collinear. P and R. But S is between Q and R. So I've got kind of these segments right here. Now, I don't know if these are accurate distance-wise or anything. I'm just going off of my first sketch, off of my first read. So if you read and you get some more information, you could always adjust your image so that it's not visually deceptive. It's not tricking you. So Q is between P and R, S is between Q and R is between Q and T. So actually, there's even another point on here. 5 points, all collinear. Now, it says that P to T, the whole thing, P to T, the whole distance is 34. All right, so I've got a total distance from P to T of 34. It also lets me know that Q to R, okay, let me actually make this a different color. Q to R is 8. And then it says lastly that P to Q, S to Q, and S to R are all equal. So what I'm going to actually do real quick is erase everything and draw it a little better to scale now. So I've got P all the way to T. And I know that that is 34. And then I've got these other points along the way. P to Q, S to Q, Q to S. So Q is between P and R. S is between Q and R. And R is between Q and T. And then to write out, kind of like I said, what I already know here, I know that that's 34. I know that P to Q, S to Q, and S to R are all equal. They all equal each other. And then I know that the distance of Q to R is 8. Pick something that'll stand out on here. This distance is 8. So ultimately what I'm looking for is RT. I'm looking for here, R, to here, T. And so this one involves just kind of, honestly, a little intuition. When you see that this distance is 8, this distance right here is 8, but it's split by 2 equal parts, that lets you know that they must both be the same thing. And they're each half of 8, which is 4. And P to Q also equals those 3, which means it's also 4. So I've got these 3 sections that equal 4, and then I've got this unknown section. So the whole entire segment is 34, and these 3 are each 4. So if I take away 3 times 4, that leaves me with 22. That means that R to T, segment RT, must be 22 units. Last one I'll work with you is number 10. B is between A and C. So again, I like to start sketching as soon as I read the problem. I've got A to C. B is somewhere in the middle, but it doesn't say that B is a midpoint. So I'm not going to put it perfectly in the middle. I'm just going to draw it a little off to the side. I don't know if it's closer to A or closer to C yet. I will know. But for now, I know that A to B is 4x minus 5. And I know that B to C is 2x plus 1. And I know that this whole thing, A to C, okay, equals 26. So that actually gave me a lot of information. It wants me to ultimately find B to C. This right here. That's ultimately what I'm looking for, is that length. So there's a couple of ways I can approach this. First thing, I know that these two are parts. So that's a part, this is a part, and I know that a part plus a part equals the whole thing. And so if I take 4x minus 5, which is part 1, and I add that to 2x plus 1, which is part 2, they're going to equal 26, which is the whole thing. And so I'm going to combine like terms. 4x plus 2x is 6x. Negative 5 plus 1 brings me up to negative 4, and then it equals 26. Now, this one's pretty nice because all I have to move over is this 4. I'm going to add it. Gives me 30. Now I need to get rid of my 6. Going to divide both sides by 6. X equals 5. That's great. I must know it, but it's not what the problem's asking me for. It's asking me to find BC. I know from here that BC equals 2x plus 1. I now know that x is 5. And so 2 times 5 is 10. Plus 1 equals 11. BC equals 11. BC equals 11. And if it did, it doesn't, but if it asked you to find AB, AB is going to be the whole thing minus the part that you know. So AB would be 15. Doesn't ask you for that, but if it did, that is information we now easily know because of all the other solving we have done. So that's all for 1.2 notes and practice. Make sure you check in for 1.3 coming up next class period.